Hey, security peeps. We are live with another edition of Breaking into Cybersecurity, but this is a special event called Hacking the Federal Cyber Job Market. And I'm here with Love Rutledge. Say hi, everybody, Love.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. So I'm Renee Small, Cybersecurity Super Recruiter, helping awesome leaders hire great talent and helping wonderful talent meet awesome leaders. We are here this morning, or I guess this afternoon, depending on where you are. Love and I are here. We met a few weeks ago.
Yep.
Love was on a panel giving amazing statistics about the thousands of open positions in security. And I pretty much stalked her after she got off the panel and said, I need to meet you. I need to have you come on and speak to my audience because there are so many people that I know who are trying to break into the federal government, who are trying to break into cybersecurity. Some have experience, some do not have formal experience. And I know that there is such an opportunity in the space where you are, especially when you talk about the thousands of jobs. So I wanted to get your expertise, let everyone hear from you. And I am excited to have you here chatting with us. So before we get started, we typically have folks chime in, let us know where you're coming in from. I know mostly this is my LinkedIn crew. So I'm already seeing Jeffrey here, Chris Clayton here. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I know there were quite a few people who anticipated telling me that, yes, they're very interested in participating today. So, Love, I am going to have you introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and come on your show and chat with you, Renee, and some of the people that you interface with who are looking for cyber related jobs. So, my name is Love Rutledge, and I have been in the federal government for 24 years, which doesn't seem possible, but is. And I'm in senior executive service in the Department of Defense. And I want to be clear that the opinions I'm expressing today are my own, and I'm not representing the government here. So, want to be 100% clear about that. Outside of work hours, I also host a podcast for federal employees called Fed Upward, which you can find at fedupwardcoaching.com/podcast. Or you can just go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm the only Love Rutledge on LinkedIn. So you can find me there and link to my podcast there. So I try to provide tactical, practical tips for federal employees to get promoted, find information about professional organizations they might want to join, and just keep up to date on news affecting them, things going on the Hill, and changes to policies that they might care about. Having said all that, I know you all are interested in how to find jobs in the federal government, and I'm going to start at a really basic level and assume that most people don't have experience applying for federal jobs at all. And then if you have more detailed questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. I want to be clear again, I'm not a hiring specialist, but I've been in the federal government for quite a while. And my last role before I came into my current role was working as the chief of staff or the chief talent management officer for the Department of Defense. So I've dabbled in a lot of these things, but again, speaking in a personal capacity and not for the government. So Renee, with that, if you're comfortable, I'll go ahead and start talking about some of the tips that I would give federal job seekers.
Absolutely. Please go for it.
Okay, thanks. So first, the first question I have for you all is, how are you networking? Obviously, you are connected to Renee, which is a great starting point to figure out how to connect to federal jobs. But one of the things I think people don't realize is there are many professional organizations out there that are supporting federal employees. So if you want to become a federal employee and you want to get to know people who are hiring managers in the federal government, then it makes sense to join some of these organizations. And they're some of them are very broad and some of them are very niche down. So I sent Renee a Word document that I hope has made it out to all of you that has a link to a list of different professional organizations that you might want to consider joining, depending on what your preferences are, what part of the federal government might want to work for, and then just your demographics, because there are professional organizations supporting federal employees for Muslim federal employees, for Black federal employees, Hispanic federal employees, women, all kinds of different affinity groups, regional groups. And I also want to make sure you know there are specific groups supporting just folks in the defense sector and the national security sector. So if you want to niche down in that way, or you want to look for people who are like you, I strongly recommend you join one of these organizations because you can get personalized support. Some of these organizations even give resume writing seminars and webinars, and they can provide a lot of support and networking for you. And you can also find out what jobs are open through the points of contact in these organizations. So please check out that Word document that I sent to Renee. And on one of the very first links on that document is something you can click on and see a list of about 75 different professional organizations. So, second, if you want to really get serious about networking specifically for jobs in the DC area, which some of you may be in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, but if you want to focus on DC, I recommend joining a group called DC Hopefuls. It's run by a fellow federal employee. It's a side business that he runs to help people really understand how to break into executive, legislative, and judicial branch networking in a really impactful way. And Renee, I see a question about where folks can find that document. Is there a way to post it?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to post it.
Okay,
If not, I'll send it to them and DM me. I'll make a comment for them and DM me.
fantastic. So again, that's DC hopefuls if you're looking specifically to network with people in the DC area. And that's not specific to cyber jobs, but it is specific to the DC, Washington, DC metropolitan area. Okay, so that's my spiel on networking. Also, reach out to folks on LinkedIn. Please connect with me, and I'll do my best to point you in the right direction if you're looking for points of contact in specific agencies or departments. It's hard to know where you might want to work if you haven't explored federal jobs. The first thing I want to make sure everybody is aware of is that pretty much every agency and department has cyber related jobs. So don't think you only have to look in agencies that dabble in national security or that have something about information systems in their title. Everybody needs cyber professionals. So if you want to support the National Forest Service, you can do that in a capacity as a cyber professional. So I want to be clear that all agencies and departments have these jobs. So where do you go to find federal jobs? The USAJobs.gov website is the one-stop shop for all federal employment. So you need to get really familiar with that site. It is not intuitive. I will warn you, it is not easy to use. You've got to go through the paces to go onto that site. And thank you for posting that site in the chat. So USAJobs.gov is where all publicly available jobs in the government are broadcast, if you will. And so what you'll see on that website is a description of the job that may be a bit opaque and hard to understand because it's in Govy speak, but you're going to be looking for jobs that fall into 4-digit job codes or classifications, job series, they're called 4-digit codes that fall into cyber related jobs. When we think of cyber related jobs, we're generally looking at 2210s, 2210 is the 4-digit code that's information technology management, 2210. So that's a starting point, but there are a lot of other 4-digit job series that are related to cyber jobs. You have to remember that the classification system that's based on statute laws that were put into place, some of them 40 and 50 years ago. So some of this language is antiquated because Congress hasn't updated it. These job series will help guide you to the jobs you're looking for. So 2210 is the main one, but look around for others. A couple others I want to list for you. And I'm sorry, I'm referring to a document because I don't have these memorized. 0332, that's computer operations. 0335, that's computer clerk. Lower paying kind of entry level jobs might fall into that role. 0390 is telecommunications. Again, this terminology is super outdated, but that's because the laws governing these job classification rules is outdated. Unfortunately, we're stuck with what Congress has given us. Another one that you might not think about is 1420, 1420. That's an archivist. And there are electronic components and protection requirements for things that the federal government is archiving. And then another you might want to look at 0854, that's computer engineering. And so there are a variety of different 4-digit job series that you want to look for as you're doing your search on USA Jobs. If you want help on crafting your resume for the USA Jobs website, there are several websites about resume writing that I linked in that Word document that I talked about earlier that will give you some basic resources on how to craft your federal resume. And I am telling you 100%, you need to craft a separate resume for federal jobs because your normal civilian resume is not going to fare well against the algorithm that USA Jobs is using. So you want to very carefully read the job description that's posted on USA Jobs, and you want to mirror the language in it as closely as possible because most likely the search terms that are going to get you past the first screening are closely associated with the verbiage in the position description, which may be a little antiquated because people haven't updated position descriptions in a while. But know that you've got to use some of that language to marry up to what that job description looks like. Again, in the Word document that I sent you, you've got some resources for working on your own resume. Or if you're like, hey, I just want to outsource this, I want to throw money at the problem and get somebody else to work on my federal resume. There are two options for private companies that do nothing but federal resume writing. That's how specific this is. There are companies that do nothing but that. I don't recommend necessarily paying other people to write your resume, but if you are at the point where you really just want to move forward and you don't want to spend time doing that, may be an option for you. One of them is called Resume Writers. Another is a company called DCS Learn, owned by Adele Dantzler. I don't get any kickbacks for referring people to these companies, but Adele is really good at what she does, and she offers a lot of free content on federal resume writing that you might find helpful. So I just think she does a great job of putting a lot of free resources out. So highly recommend looking for her. And again, that website is listed on the Word document, so you don't need to write her name down.
Look, can I ask a quick question about the resume?
Yeah. Yeah.
When wh I'm always intrigued about what is different or unique about federal resumes versus industry resumes. At a
Mhm.
high level, could you explain to us what the differences are?
You bet. At its most basic, you're going to include a lot more information, detailed information on your federal resume than on your civilian resume. Now, on your regular private industry resume, you're going to keep things short and sweet, right? You want to be concise. On your federal resume, you want to be long winded because you want to have as many different versions of potential keywords that might be screened by a computer as you can possibly fit in there. You've also got to be specific about whether your job, I was working full time or part time, exactly how much money you were making. Was it 40 hours a week? Things that you normally wouldn't put in a private industry resume because they're assumed. You want to be really specific about that in your public sector resume. And again, it's very tedious. There is a resume builder in the website. I actually do recommend using it because it forces you to go through every step and enter that information so you don't forget anything. So it's a little tedious, a little time consuming, but once you have produced it, then you can just make minor tweaks for each job you might want to apply for. And I do recommend tailoring to each job because again, you want to use words that marry up with those position descriptions that you see on USA Jobs. But more detailed, more lengthy, the style is not going to flow. It's not going to feel like it is a super well written, easy to read resume because that's not the format that the system requires you to create, unfortunately.
Got it, got it. When we tell people on the non-federal side or the commercial side, keep your resume to, if you have under 5 years, about 1 page, more than 5 years, 2 pages. Some technology resumes can go longer. We tend to say keep it short. You're on the federal side is don't keep it short ever. Tell the
Don't
complete
keep
outline. Give it every
everything. And so you can actually post when you create a profile in USA Jobs, you can post your short form resume as an attachment. And then again, I encourage you to go through the process of using the resume builder in USA Jobs as well. And then also make sure that you click the choice to make your profile and your resume searchable because if you do that, then people who are hiring managers who are out looking for people with maybe a specific certification or a specific skill set can search for you. So it's not just one way you searching for the specific job.
got it. Okay, perfect. All right. I look forward to the next step.
All right. So
Next,
that's the USA jobs process. And again, it is not the easiest to navigate, but there are a lot of resources out there to help you. So definitely find those resources that I sent you because, to be frank, you're going to need them. When you're in USA Jobs and you're looking for positions, keep in mind most of what is posted, there are competitive service jobs. There are also what's called accepted service jobs. And in the Department of Defense, we are lucky enough to have gotten special statutory permission to create what was called cyber accepted service. So if you Google that, you'll see that there are hiring authorities that allow the Department of Defense to bypass some of the competitive processes that take a long time and go straight to making offers. So you can save yourself time by looking at jobs that are accepted service. Now, one caveat to that is that it's not as easy to move around within the federal government to other federal jobs if you have taken an accepted service position. It doesn't mean you are automatically eligible to apply for competitive service jobs. Those are two different categories of positions. What does that mean? So, accepted service positions were created that flexibility was created so that federal agencies and departments could hire people with specific skill sets more quickly and easily without going through the normal full and open competition that is required for federal jobs. If you're wondering why does the federal hiring process take so long, it's because there are statutory requirements that say we have to go through very specific steps to ensure fair and open competition. So again, if you're applying for an accepted EXCEPTED, not ACCEPTED, accepted service jobs, you may get through the process much more quickly. Another note, if you have a disability, you can go through what is called this Schedule A letter process. And I encourage you to just Google it and you'll find all the resources that you need to go through the process to get a Schedule A letter. Then you also may be able to bypass some of the normal competitive service processes because one of the guiding principles that Congress has laid out for federal hiring is that we want to make sure that people with disabilities get a fair shake and that they can bypass some of the competitive hiring processes. So if you are disabled, I highly encourage you to explore that process because that can allow you to get through more quickly as well, particularly in agencies and departments that do not have some of the special authorities that the Department of Defense has been granted. So those are some things that can speed the process up for you. In general, the competitive service hiring process can take months. And so it is not quick and it's not easy. So I don't want to discourage anyone from applying for federal jobs, but know that you've got to pack your patience when you start into this process because to get through all those competitive service wickets can take a while because there are a lot of checks that hiring organizations have to go through as they bring candidates through the process. So know that it will take several months to get through the process. And that doesn't include how long it may take to get a clearance if you are not a cleared employee. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions out there about how to get a clearance. And I want to encourage you to go to a website called clearancejobs.com. You can sign up for a profile there. It's free. And they have both employers and employees on that site, some federal, some private sector. And they have a ton of free resources that talk about the clearance process, how to get cleared, things that can keep you from getting cleared. And they update that material really regularly. If there are changes to policy or law, you'll know about it quickly if you're a member of that group. So I'll stop there and see if we have any questions or things folks want to address.
I have some because I know a lot of people do tend to ask about clearances as a whole. So, my first question is the clearance. I know the clearance process takes a while. Can one be hired before they get their clearance? Or, like, how does that work?
So usually you'll get a tentative offer. You have to prove that you are eligible for a clearance, as in you are not a convicted felon, that sort of thing. And so you would be given an offer. And in many cases, you can be granted what's called an interim clearance in a very short period of time, just a few weeks. And then you can come on board into the position with an interim clearance. And so they'll continue the full longer term background check on you But they do a quick check to grant you that interim clearance to be like, hey, you've cleared the minimum barrier, you can come on board. And usually that takes a few weeks to a couple of months, as opposed to many months that the full clearance process can take. And that's at a lower level of clearance. If you need a higher level of clearance, it can take even longer. So a secret clearance versus a top secret clearance, it just takes a little bit longer to get through the more rigorous process.
Got it. And I know that some folks recently have either taken recreational drugs or medicinal marijuana, we know is legal in some areas. How does that impact them being able to apply for one of these federal positions?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that, particularly because there are so many states now where either recreational or medicinal marijuana is legal, but still illegal at the federal level, which is confusing. But as once you are a federal employee, you can't use even if you were in a state where it is legal, just to be clear. Again, I recommend you go to Clearance Jobs because they have a lot of articles on this very topic. Having used recreational or medicinal marijuana in the last few years does not automatically disqualify you from getting a clearance, but you have to be honest about your usage. If you lie about your drug use and during the background check process, they catch you lying, you're never going to get a federal job. So you've got to be honest. And there are some stipulations that allow you to continue through the process, even if you have used recreational drugs within the last 5 years. So I think I have, let me see.
While you're pulling
Uh,
that in, I will.
Let me see if I can find out. I have a link that I think might be helpful.
Okay.
So let me see if I can post it.
There is if you want to put it in either one, the private chat, I can put it
Yeah,
over
I just put
there.
it in the private chat, so hopefully you can move that
Okay.
over. But
Yeah.
that's an article that specifically outlines what the process is because the Biden administration has changed some of the rules. They published an executive order on basically being able to get a security clearance even if you have used drugs recreationally within the last 5 years. But again, you
Mhm.
otherwise have a clean record and answer all the questions honestly.
Jonathan Harris has a couple questions or a
Okay.
question. Would so the company would sponsor the clearance, correct? Individuals cannot request for themselves. He wants to
Correct.
make sure this.
So absolutely. So if you're looking for a federal job, the federal government does the background check. You can't initiate the process on your own. Same thing with private companies that are contractors to the federal government. They initiate paperwork that then goes to the federal government and then they conduct the background check. So the private company cannot conduct it on its own. It has to be conducted by the federal government.
Thank you for that. And Christopher Weir says, do you recommend using USA Jobs resume builder or a longer written resume? Would you expressly list full, part-time, et cetera, in your job experience section?
So yes and yes, use the resume builder to create that longer form resume again because it forces you to include all the elements that will help you get through the wickets. And then yes, include all of your full-time employment. If you have part-time employment that was like your first job when you were 19, you don't have to include that. I recommend not including that. But any employment that you had that was full-time, post-college or post-high school, I recommend including because you never know what skills or abilities you might be listing as a part of that employment that could be relevant.
You know what, love? That's a really good point because a lot of times on the commercial side, we tell folks to keep because they're keeping that resume shorter, we'll say put relevant information in. You don't have to put every single job.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, especially people who have extensive experience, some of us at 20 plus
People of a
years,
certain age, yeah,
women of a certain age that have 20 plus years experience,
yeah.
we cut it off and we could put additional, usually, and this is what I would be giving, the advice that I would be giving to people that come to me from a commercial perspective, I would say anything after, if you can't fit it in a resume, if it's not really relevant anymore, the
Mhm.
technologies have changed, things are different, you can list at the bottom, additional experience includes these project managers, cyber analysts, blah, 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 at these varying companies, but just make it like small at the bottom. And in this case, you want us to put, if it's relevant, if it's
Yeah.
something post college or what have you, put it all in.
I say put it all in because again, you never know what words you might be using. to describe your experience in that job that might be relevant. Even if you were doing something when you were 22 years old that wasn't related to cyber, but you were in a management or supervisory position, that could be relevant. And so you want to make sure you capture it.
Perfect. Jeffrey asks, I've applied for jobs on USA Jobs. What's the best way to get a hold of a hiring manager? I've called, but unfortunately haven't heard.
So, sadly, that is a common experience with folks who have applied for jobs and then feel like they've gotten ghosted, like they don't hear anything else in the process. And so, I want you to know first, don't be discouraged because there is a lot of opaqueness in terms of getting in touch with a hiring manager to ask questions like, hey, can you give me advice on why I didn't make the cut? And so, there should always be a phone number and an email address on the USA Jobs announcement that you can reach out to. Now, if they do not respond, there's not a lot of recourse that you have in terms of following up in that way. But I do recommend if you get to the point where you have an interview, taking down the interviewer's name so that you can reach out to them via LinkedIn, send them a thank you email, that sort of thing, and then reach out directly if you weren't selected to get some pointers or advice on what you can do to either strengthen your resume or your interview skills so that you can get past that wicket next time. But unfortunately, a lot of hiring managers in the federal space or the HR professionals supporting them don't follow up with people who were not selected. And that is just the sad reality of how the process works. We have not empowered our human resources professionals within the federal space to do a lot of the white glove follow-up treatment that you see on the private sector side with getting a one-on-one phone call to let you know that you weren't selected and maybe some advice on what you can do to improve. It's just more unusual to have that happen on the federal side.
And love, just so you know, they don't always do it. It's not either. Even calls a wishful thinking that everybody knows that.
Particular part of the process a little better. And I want to
Yeah.
be clear, there are some federal agencies and departments that do a great job of this, but unfortunately, they are the exception and not the rule in 2024.
So we are at the 30-minute mark. It happens so quickly, which I anticipated. And so I want to again, love, have you share your any final tips, anything that you'd like to say prior to us wrapping up right now. Definitely again, I'm gonna post your website up here, fedupwardcoaching.com. And Love has an amazing podcast that shares all some great information about what's happening in the federal space. So, Love, I'm going to give you a minute to talk about that, and then we will wrap up.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. So, again, I'm Love Rutledge. I have a podcast for federal employees, and I am a federal employee of 24 years. FedUpwardCoaching.com is my website, so you can find me there, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I am the only Love Rutledge on LinkedIn. And so I look forward to connecting with you. Please join my email list, and you'll get every other week emails from me with what's new in federal employment and policy changes and information that hopefully will be helpful for you in your job search and will support you after you're in the federal government as a civilian employee. Now, I want to say there are also a lot of military opportunities in the cyberspace available. So we didn't get into that at all, but tons of opportunities. And just within the Department of Defense, tens of thousands of cyber related jobs are available. That was something that I talked about in the conference that you attended, Renee, that connected us. Tens of thousands of cyber related jobs on the civilian and military side. So lots of opportunity, and I hope you guys will find a way to pursue those opportunities.
I'm going to help them. I'm definitely going to help them do it. Love,
Amazing.
thank you so very much for being here. Security peeps. One more thing before we wrap. As you all know, I bring awesome people like Love to this podcast occasionally. We can't do it every single week based on scheduling of leaders and my own, but as often as we can, bring on folks to talk about jobs, opportunities, all the things. I am having a cyber job offers challenge starting on Monday, and it's going to be 6 days, 30 minutes every day during the Eastern time lunch hour, and I guess West Coast breakfast hour. So it's going to be 12 noon. It's giving tips just like this and challenging you, giving you homework. I've already given some people some homework to get you closer and closer to that job offer because we know there are opportunities out there. It's just making sure that we get you to them. Check that out. Check out Love's podcast and her program. And we will talk to you soon. Bye everybody.
Thank you.